She stood alone in the grand foyer of Ashworth Hall, her gloved hands clasped tightly before her, while her husband looked past her as if she were nothing more than a pillar of marble. The candlelight caught the delicate embroidery of her gown, a gown she had chosen with such foolish hope that morning, believing tonight might be different. But his eyes, those cold gray eyes she had once found so compelling, slid over her without recognition and settled on Lady Beatrice Pemberton instead. Lady Beatrice was laughing. She was always laughing. Her hand rested on the Duke of Ashworth's arm with an ease that Elara had never been permitted. They had been married for 2 years, and still he flinched when her fingers brushed his sleeve. The guests moved around Elara like water around a stone. She remained perfectly still, her smile fixed in place, her posture impeccable, while inside something small and tender began to wither. She had been 18 when she married him, young enough to believe that patience and devotion could warm even the coldest heart. She had filled Ashworth Hall with fresh flowers from the garden. She had learned his favorite meals and instructed the cook. She had worn the colors he once mentioned he preferred, had read the books he loved, had learned the names of all his tenants and their children. She had done everything, everything. And still he looked at her as though she were a stranger. The clock struck 11. Elara watched her husband lead Lady Beatrice toward the dance floor. His hand rested at the small of Lady Beatrice's back. Propriety be damned. Everyone saw it. Everyone whispered. And everyone looked at Elara with that particular expression she had come to know so well. Pity. Always pity. She did not cry. She had learned not to cry in public. She had learned not to cry at all. But that night, standing alone in the grand foyer of the house that was supposed to be her home, Elara Vance, Duchess of Ashworth, felt the last ember of hope inside her chest flicker and die. She had been waiting for love that would never come. And she was so very tired of waiting. The morning after the ball, Elara woke to an empty bed. The sheets beside her were cold and undisturbed. He had not come to her room. He rarely did. Their marriage existed in papers and formalities, in shared meals eaten largely in silence, in brief encounters in hallways where he nodded at her as though she were a distant acquaintance. She dressed without ringing for her maid. She was capable of managing her own buttons and laces. She had learned that too. She had learned to need no one. The window of her bedchamber overlooked the east gardens, and she stood there for a long moment watching the first light touch the roses. She had planted those roses herself in the first months of her marriage, thinking that if she could make something beautiful grow at Ashworth Hall, perhaps she could belong here. But the roses bloomed every summer regardless of her loneliness. They did not care whether she was loved. They simply grew. She pressed her palm flat against the cold glass and made a decision. She would stop seeking what he would not give. She would stop arranging her life around his indifference. She would stop hopping. From this morning forward, she would live for herself. The change was not dramatic. It was not announced. There was no confrontation, no declaration, no tearful scene. Elara simply stopped arranging fresh flowers in his study. She stopped inquiring about his preferred meals. She stopped waiting in the drawing room each evening in case he wished to speak with her. She stopped watching him across the dinner table with those hopeful, aching eyes. She began taking her breakfast in the morning room instead of the formal dining room where he took his. She began walking the estate grounds alone, not hopping to encounter him, but simply because she enjoyed the fresh air and the sound of birds. She began visiting the village more often, not to seek reports on his tenants, but to sit with the elderly women who remembered her name and smiled when she arrived. She began, quietly and without fanfare, to build a life that did not center around a man who did not want her. The first week, the Duke noticed nothing. The second week, he noted her absence at dinner with mild irritation. He said nothing. The third week, he walked past the morning room and saw her through the open door, bent over a book, a cup of tea cooling beside her, her expression peaceful in a way he had not seen before. He paused. He almost spoke. But habit was a powerful thing, and he had spent 2 years perfecting the art of silence, so he walked on. The fourth week, everything began to change. It happened on a Tuesday. Elara had spent the morning at the orphanage in the village, reading to the children. She had begun volunteering there shortly after her wedding, driven initially by loneliness and a desperate need to be useful. But now it had become something more. It had become a place where she was wanted, where she was needed, where her presence mattered. She returned to Ashworth Hall in the late afternoon, her cheeks flushed from the walk, her hair slightly mussed by the wind. She was not thinking of the Duke. She was thinking of little Thomas, the boy with the crooked smile who had finally managed to read an entire sentence without stumbling. She was thinking of Mary, the shy girl who had pressed a wildflower into her hand as she left. She was thinking of things that made her happy. And then she walked into the entrance hall and found her husband standing there, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "You were not here for the estate meeting," he said. His voice was cool, measured. It was the voice of a man who expected to be obeyed. Elara paused. Once, such a statement would have sent her spiraling into apologies and explanations and desperate attempts to please him. But now she simply looked at him, this man she had married, this stranger she had tried so hard to love, and felt only a quiet, distant sadness. "I was not aware my presence was required," she said calmly. "You have never asked me to attend before." A flicker of something crossed his face, surprise perhaps, or confusion. "You always attend," he said, as if this were obvious. "I used to," she corrected gently. "I did not realize you noticed." The words hung in the air between them. She had not meant them as an accusation. They were simply the truth, but something in his expression shifted. His jaw tightened. His eyes searched her face as though looking for something he had not expected to find. "What has changed?" he asked. Elara considered the question. She considered telling him the truth, that she had spent 2 years loving a man who treated her as an inconvenience, that she had spent countless nights alone in a cold bed while he entertained women like Lady Beatrice Pemberton in full view of society, that she had finally understood that no amount of devotion could make someone love you if they had already decided not to. But the truth was a heavy thing, and she was tired of carrying it. "Nothing has changed," she said. "I have simply found other ways to occupy my time." She smiled at him. It was not a cold smile. It was not a bitter smile. It was the smile of a woman who had made peace with her circumstances. And that, more than anything else, seemed to unsettle him. She excused herself and walked up the stairs, leaving him standing alone in the entrance hall, his arms still crossed, his expression still unreadable. But for the first time in 2 years, she did not look back. The weeks that followed were strange. The Duke began appearing in places he had never been before. The morning room where Elara took her breakfast, the library where she read in the afternoons, the garden path where she walked at dusk. He did not speak to her. He simply appeared as though he were studying something he did not understand. Elara found it disconcerting at first, then amusing, then simply irrelevant. She had other things to occupy her mind. The orphanage needed funding for a new roof, and she had thrown herself into organizing a charity event to raise the money. She had discovered a talent for this kind of work, the careful orchestration of donations and volunteers, the gentle persuasion of wealthy acquaintances who could spare more than they claimed. She was good at it, and more importantly, she enjoyed it. She was no longer the lonely, desperate girl who had arrived at Ashworth Hall as a new bride. She was becoming someone else, someone stronger, someone who did not need a man's affection to feel whole. And people noticed. Lord Marcus Tilney noticed. Lord Tilney was a widower. He was kind and unassuming and possessed of a gentle humor that made people feel at ease. He had been a friend to Elara in the early days of her marriage, offering conversation when the Duke offered only silence, offering company when the Duke offered only absence. He had never been improper. He had never presumed, but he had always been there. And now, as Elara organized her charity event, Lord Tilney proved himself invaluable. He offered his estate for the gathering. He helped her secure donations from reluctant acquaintances. He sat with her in the village tea shop, going over lists and arrangements, making her laugh with his dry observations about their neighbors. He looked at her the way she had once wished her husband would look at her. The first time the Duke saw them together, he was riding through the village on his way back from inspecting a tenant farm. He saw them through the window of the tea shop, their heads bent together over a paper, their expressions easy and familiar. He stopped his horse. He watched. He watched as Elara smiled at something Lord Tilney said. He watched as Tilney reached across the table to point at something on the paper, his fingers brushing her wrist. He watched as she laughed, genuinely laughed, the sound carrying through the window and into the street. The Duke felt something stir in his chest, something unfamiliar, something sharp and hot and deeply unpleasant. Jealousy. He did not recognize it at first. He had never been jealous of anything in his life. He was the Duke of Ashworth. He had never needed to be jealous. He had always possessed everything he wanted, and the things he did not want he simply ignored. Elara had been one of those things, a wife acquired through duty, a marriage arranged for political convenience. She had been beautiful and eager and so transparently hopeful, and he had found her devotion exhausting. He had not asked for it. He had not wanted it. He had not known what to do with a woman who loved him so openly, so vulnerably, so completely. So he had pushed her away. He had told himself she would learn, that she would adjust her expectations, that she would become the kind of wife he wanted, the kind who managed his household and gave him heirs and did not demand his heart. And now, watching her laugh with another man, he realized with dawning horror that she had learned exactly what he had taught her. She had become the wife he had asked for, distant, independent, unbothered by his indifference. And he hated it. He hated everything about it. He rode back to Ashworth Hall in a state of cold fury. He did not understand it. He did not want to understand it. But he could not shake the image of Elara's smile, the one she had given to Lord Tilney so freely, the one she had once given to him, and which he had never bothered to return. He went to her bedchamber that night for the first time in months. He stood outside her door for a long time, his hand raised to knock, his mind tangled in something he could not name. He did not knock. He was too proud, too afraid, too unfamiliar with the language of vulnerability. He went to his own room instead and lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the ghost of a love he had never bothered to accept. The charity event was a triumph. Elara had transformed Lord Tilney's estate into a scene of understated elegance. Lanterns hung from the trees. Musicians played in the garden. Guests wandered through the grounds, admiring the floral arrangements and contributing generously to the orphanage fund. Elara moved through the crowd with quiet grace, accepting compliments and deflecting praise. She was wearing a gown of deep emerald green, a color she had chosen because she liked it, not because she thought anyone else would. Her hair was arranged simply. She wore no jewelry except her wedding ring. She had never felt more like herself. The Duke arrived late. He had not told her he was coming. He appeared at the edge of the garden, dressed in his usual severe black, his expression dark and unreadable. The crowd parted for him instinctively. He was the Duke of Ashworth. People always made way. Elara saw him and felt a small, complicated twist of emotion, surprise, wariness, the faintest echo of the longing she had worked so hard to extinguish. She pushed it aside. "Your Grace," she said as he approached. Her voice was calm, polite, the voice of a duchess greeting her husband at a social function. "Elara," he said her name as though it were a question, as though he were trying to remember something he had forgotten. "I did not expect you to attend," she said. Evidently not. There was an edge to his voice. She did not understand it. She did not want to understand it. The event is going well, she said. We have raised nearly enough for the new roof. I heard Lord Tilney was instrumental in the planning. The name hung in the air between them. Elara studied her husband's face, trying to read his expression. He looked tense, almost angry. She did not know why. He has been very helpful, she said carefully. I am sure he has. A long pause. The music drifted through the garden. The guests laughed and talked around them, oblivious to the strange tension building between the Duke and his Duchess. Perhaps you should dance with him, the Duke said. The words were meant to wound. She could see it in his eyes. He wanted to hurt her. He wanted her to react. But Elara had spent 2 years learning not to react. Perhaps I shall, she said evenly, if he asks. She turned and walked away before he could respond. She did not look back, but she felt his gaze on her the entire time, burning between her shoulder blades like a brand. Lord Tilney did ask her to dance. She accepted. It was a waltz, elegant and slow, and he held her at a proper distance, his hands respectful, his conversation light. He made her laugh. He made her feel seen. And across the garden, the Duke of Ashworth watched them, his hands clenched at his sides, his heart pounding with a jealousy so fierce it frightened him. He had no right to feel this way. He knew that. He had ignored her for 2 years. He had dismissed her affections. He had treated her as a duty, a burden, an inconvenience. He had allowed her to believe she was unlovable. And now another man was showing her the attention she deserved, and he could not bear it. He left the party early. He could not watch any more. But the damage was already done. The seed had been planted, and for the first time in his life, the Duke of Ashworth was forced to confront a truth he had been avoiding for 2 years. He was losing his wife, and he had no one to blame but himself. In the weeks following the charity event, the atmosphere at Ashworth Hall shifted. The Duke became a presence in Elara's life in a way he had never been before. He appeared at breakfast. He lingered in the library. He asked her questions about her day, her work at the orphanage, her thoughts on estate matters. Elara found it bewildering. For 2 years she had longed for his attention, and now that she no longer sought it, he seemed determined to give it. She did not trust it. She did not trust him. She had learned that his indifference was painful, but his sudden interest was unsettling in a different way entirely. She remained polite. She remained gracious. But she no longer offered him pieces of herself the way she once had. She answered his questions with courtesy and nothing more. She did not share her thoughts, her fears, her hopes. Those were hers now, private treasures she had learned to guard. The Duke noticed. Of course he noticed. He had spent 2 years barely looking at her, and now he could not seem to look away. He noticed the way she smiled at the gardener but not at him. He noticed the way she lingered in conversation with the housekeeper, but excused herself quickly when he entered a room. He noticed the way her eyes no longer followed him across the dinner table, the way her voice no longer held that hopeful lilt when she spoke to him. He noticed everything he had refused to see before, and it was slowly destroying him. One evening in late autumn he found her in the library. She was sitting by the fire, a book open on her lap, her expression distant and thoughtful. She did not hear him enter. She was lost in her own world, and for a moment he simply stood in the doorway watching her. She was beautiful. She had always been beautiful, but there was something different about her now, something he could not name. She seemed older, wiser, stronger. She seemed like a woman who had survived a great sorrow and emerged on the other side. He had done that to her, he realized. He had been her great sorrow. The thought made him feel sick. "Elara," he said softly. She looked up, startled. For just a moment before she composed her expression, he saw something flicker in her eyes. Wariness, distance, the absence of the warmth that had once been there so freely. "Yes." He crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her. He did not know what he was doing. He did not know what he wanted to say. He only knew that he could not bear the silence between them any longer. "I have been thinking," he began. He stopped. He did not know how to do this. He had never learned. Elara waited. She did not fill the silence the way she once would have. She simply waited, her hands resting calmly on her book, her expression patient but guarded. "I have not been a good husband," he said finally. The words fell into the quiet room like stones into still water. Elara did not react. She did not reassure him, did not deny his statement, did not rush to ease his guilt. She simply looked at him with those calm, patient eyes and waited for him to continue. "I know I have been distant," he said. "I know I have been cold. I know I have not given you what you deserved." Still she said nothing. "I want to do better," he said. The words felt clumsy, inadequate. He was a man accustomed to command, and now he was fumbling through an apology he did not know how to make. "I want to try." Elara closed her book. She set it aside. She folded her hands in her lap. "Why now?" she asked. The question was simple. It was not angry. It was not bitter. It was simply curious, as though she genuinely wanted to understand. And he did not know how to answer. "Because I saw you with another man, and it made me insane with jealousy. Because I have spent 2 years ignoring you, and now you have learned to ignore me back. Because I am terrified that I have lost you, and I am only now realizing how much that terrifies me." He could not say any of those things. They were too raw, too vulnerable, too true. "Because I have realized my mistakes," he said instead, "and I wish to correct them." Elara studied him for a long moment. He could not read her expression. He had never been able to read her. He had never bothered to try. "I appreciate your honesty," she said at last, "but I am not the woman I was 2 years ago." "I know," he said. "No," she said gently, "I do not think you do." She rose from her chair. She did not hurry. She did not flee. She simply stood, her book tucked under her arm, her posture straight and graceful. "I spent 2 years trying to be the wife you wanted," she said. "I filled your house with flowers. I learned your favorite meals. I memorized the names of your tenants. I did everything I could think of to make you notice me, to make you care for me, to make you love me." She paused. Her voice was steady. "You did not want my love. You made that very clear, and I have made peace with that." "Elara." "I am not angry with you," she said. "I want you to understand that. I am not angry. I am not bitter. I am simply finished." The word landed like a blow. "Finished." She did not say it cruelly. She did not say it to wound him. She said it as a statement of fact, as simply and truthfully as she might have said that the sun had set. "I wish you well," she said, "truly, but I cannot give you what you are asking for. I no longer have it to give." She walked toward the door. He stood, his heart pounding, his mind racing, everything inside him screaming that he could not let her go. "Elara, please." She stopped at the door. She did not turn around, but she paused, her hand resting on the frame, her head bowed slightly. "I loved you," she said quietly. "I loved you so much that it consumed me, and you looked at me as though I were invisible. You made me feel like I did not matter, like my love was an inconvenience, like I was nothing more than a duty you had to endure." Her voice trembled slightly. It was the first crack in her composure, the first sign that beneath her calm exterior there was still pain. "I cannot go back to that," she said. "I cannot become that woman again. I have worked too hard to become someone I can respect." She left the room. The door closed softly behind her. The Duke stood alone in the library, the fire crackling in the hearth, the silence pressing in around him. And for the first time in his life, he understood the true weight of what he had lost. Winter came to Ashworth Hall. The gardens turned bare and gray. The days grew short. The cold seeped into the stones of the old house, and the servants lit fires in every room to keep the chill at bay. But there was a different kind of cold that had settled between the Duke and his Duchess, a cold that no fire could touch. They still occupied the same house. They still shared meals when protocol demanded. They still performed the public duties of their marriage with practiced civility. But the distance between them had become a chasm, and Elara showed no signs of wanting to bridge it. The Duke did not know what to do. He had spent his entire life being pursued, admired, desired. He had never had to pursue anyone. He had never had to earn affection. And now, when it mattered most, he found himself utterly unequipped. He began watching her more carefully, not with jealousy now, but with something closer to desperation. He memorized her routines. He noted the books she read, the flowers she preferred, the way she took her tea. All the things she had once done for him, he now found himself doing for her. It was a strange and painful irony. He left a volume of poetry on her dressing table, a collection he had heard her mention to the housekeeper. She thanked him politely and said nothing more. He arranged for her favorite flowers, white roses, to be placed in the morning room. She smiled at them but made no comment. He invited her to accompany him on his rides through the estate. She declined, citing other obligations. Nothing he did seemed to reach her. Nothing he offered seemed to matter. And then, in the coldest part of January, something happened that changed everything. A storm came. It was sudden and violent, the kind of winter storm that swept down from the north without warning. The roads became impassable. The village was cut off. And Elara, who had gone to the orphanage that morning, found herself trapped there as the snow piled higher and higher. The Duke received word from a frantic servant that the Duchess was stranded. He did not hesitate. He did not think. He pulled on his heaviest coat, saddled his strongest horse, and rode out into the storm himself. The journey should have taken 20 minutes. It took over an hour. The snow was blinding. The wind was brutal. His horse stumbled more than once, and by the time he reached the orphanage, he was half frozen and trembling with exhaustion. He found her inside, wrapped in a blanket, sitting with the children by the fire. She looked up when he entered, and her expression shifted from surprise to concern to something he could not name. "What are you doing here?" she asked, rising from her chair. "You should not have come. It is not safe." "I came for you," he said. His voice was rough from the cold. His hands were shaking. "I could not leave you here alone." She stared at him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You could have died," she said quietly. "I know. Why would you take such a risk?" He wanted to say something eloquent. He wanted to say something that would make her understand. But he was cold and exhausted, and the only words that came were the simplest ones, the truest ones, the ones he had been too proud to speak for 2 years. "Because I could not bear to lose you," he said. The words hung in the air. The fire crackled. The children watched with wide eyes. Elara's expression softened, just slightly, just for a moment. "You are freezing," she said. "Come to the fire." She took his arm and led him to the hearth. She wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. She brought him hot tea. She did all these things without fuss, without drama, with the same quiet competence she had brought to everything in her life. And he sat there, shivering and exhausted, and watched her. "I am sorry," he said. She paused. "You have already apologized." "I know, but I do not think I understood what I was apologizing for." He looked up at her. His eyes were tired and red-rimmed from the cold. "I was cruel to you, not with words perhaps, but with silence, with indifference, with neglect. I made you feel invisible. I made you feel unwanted, and you were neither of those things." Elara was quiet. "I was a fool," he continued. "I thought love was a weakness. I thought your devotion was something I could ignore until it went away. I did not realize that I was destroying something precious. I did not realize that I was destroying you." "You did not destroy me," she said quietly. "I am still here. I know you are, and I see you now. I see all of you." His voice broke slightly. "I see your strength, your kindness, your resilience. I see the woman you have become, and I know I had no part in it. I know I did nothing to help you become her, But I admire her, I admire you, and I wish more than anything that I had been the man you deserved from the beginning." Elara looked at him for a long time. The firelight danced across her face. The wind howled outside. "I do not know if I can trust this," she said at last. "I do not know if I can trust you." "I know," he said, "and I will wait. I will wait as long as it takes. I will earn your trust if you will let me. I will earn your respect. I will earn your affection. I will do whatever you ask for as long as you ask until you believe that I am sincere." She did not answer, but she did not pull away. And that for now was enough. The storm lasted 3 days. They stayed at the orphanage, helping the matron care for the children, sleeping in separate rooms, eating simple meals by the fire. It was a strange, suspended time, removed from the formalities of their usual life. There were no servants, no guests, no social obligations. There were only the two of them and the children and the snow. And something began to shift. Elara watched him with the children. He was awkward at first, unsure how to interact with them, but he tried. He let them climb onto his lap. He read them stories in his deep, serious voice. He made them laugh with funny faces that no one in society would have believed the cold Duke of Ashworth capable of. She saw a side of him she had never seen before, a gentleness, a vulnerability, a warmth he had hidden so deeply that even he had forgotten it existed. When the storm finally cleared and the roads were passable again, they returned to Ashworth Hall together. They did not speak much during the journey, but the silence between them felt different now, less like a wall, more like a door that had been left slightly ajar. The weeks that followed were tentative, careful. Neither of them moved too quickly. Neither of them wanted to break whatever fragile thing was growing between them. The Duke continued his efforts. He did not push. He did not demand. He simply showed up day after day, proving through small, consistent actions that he meant what he said. He asked about her work at the orphanage. He listened when she spoke. He remembered the details she shared. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Elara began to soften. She did not love him again. Not yet. She was not sure she could. The wounds of those 2 years were deep, and they would take time to heal. But she began to see him differently, not as the cold stranger who had ignored her, but as a flawed, complicated man who was trying, genuinely trying to be better. Spring came. The gardens bloomed. The roses Elara had planted so long ago, the ones that had witnessed her loneliness and her heartbreak, began to open their petals to the sun. And something else began to bloom as well, something fragile and tentative and new. It happened on an evening in late April. They were sitting in the garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. The air was warm and fragrant. The birds were singing their evening songs. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. "I received a letter from Lord Tilney today," Elara said. Her voice was casual, but she was watching him carefully, curious to see his reaction. The Duke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Did you?" "He invited me to a gathering at his estate next month." A pause. The Duke's hands clasped together in his lap. "Will you go?" he asked. "I have not decided." Another pause. The sun slipped lower. The colors deepened. "If you wish to go," the Duke said carefully, "you should go." Elara turned to look at him. "Is that truly what you want?" He met her eyes. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then he shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "it is not what I want. I do not want you to go to his estate. I do not want you to dance with him. I do not want you to laugh with him the way you used to laugh with me." He took a breath. "But I also do not want to be the man who tells you what you can and cannot do. I want you to choose. I want you to choose me." Elara studied his face. She saw the vulnerability there, the fear, the hope. She saw a man who was trying, against all his instincts, to be honest with her. "I used to dream of hearing you say things like this," she said quietly. "I used to imagine what it would feel like to know that you wanted me, that you cared for me, that you loved me." "And now," he asked, His voice was barely a whisper. "Now it feels real," she said. "Not a dream, not a fantasy, something real." She reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily in years. He looked down at their joined hands, and his eyes filled with something that looked very much like tears. "I do not deserve this," he said. "No," she agreed softly, "but you are trying, and that matters." They sat together in the garden as the sun set, their hands intertwined, the silence between them full of all the words they had not yet said. It was not a perfect ending. There were still wounds to heal, still trust to rebuild, still years of distance to bridge, but it was a beginning. And for two people who had spent so long living in the cold, even the smallest warmth felt like spring. The weeks that followed were not without their challenges. There were moments when old habits resurfaced, when the Duke retreated into his shell of formality, when Elara felt the familiar ache of old wounds. But they were learning. Slowly, awkwardly, they were learning to be honest with each other. One evening in May, he found her in the library, sitting in her usual chair by the fire. She was reading, but she looked up when he entered and she smiled. It was a real smile, warm and unguarded, and it made his heart ache in the best possible way. "I have something for you," he said. He handed her a small velvet box. She opened it and found inside a necklace. Not diamonds, not rubies, but a simple pendant shaped like a rose, crafted in silver with delicate care. "It reminded me of you," he said. "The roses you planted when you first came here. They bloomed even when I gave them no attention. They survived despite everything." Elara touched the pendant with gentle fingers. "Will you help me put it on?" she asked. He did. His hands were steady, but his heart was not. "I loved you too late," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "But I love you now, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." She turned to face him. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something that looked like hope. The kind of hope she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. "I know," she said. "I am beginning to believe it." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not. She closed her eyes, and when his lips met hers, gentle and reverent, it felt like a promise. Not a promise of perfection, not a promise that the past would be forgotten, but a promise that the future would be different, that they would face it together, that they would try. And sometimes, trying was the most courageous thing of all. The summer came to Ashworth Hall with golden light and warm breezes. The roses in the East Garden bloomed in abundance, more beautiful than they had ever been. Elara walked among them in the early mornings, her fingers brushing the petals, her heart full of a quiet contentment she had never expected to feel. The Duke often joined her. They would walk together in comfortable silence, or he would tell her about the estate, the tenants, the thousand small matters that occupied his days. She would tell him about the orphanage, about the children, about the plans she had for expanding the charity work she had grown to love. They were partners now, equals, two people who had found their way to each other after so long wandering in the dark. It was not a fairy tale. It was not a grand romance of the kind written about in novels. It was something quieter and deeper and more real. It was two imperfect people choosing, day after day, to be present for each other, to be honest, to be kind. And that, Elara thought, was a kind of magic all its own. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace watching the stars emerge one by one, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, drawing her close, and she felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "I am glad I stayed," she said quietly. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I am glad you let me earn my way back to you." "You did more than that," she said. "You showed me that I was worth loving, not just to you, but to myself." He was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and full of feeling. "You have always been worth loving. I was just too blind to see it, but I see it now. I see you, all of you, and I will spend the rest of my life grateful that you gave me a second chance." The stars shone above them, the roses whispered in the breeze, and in the garden of Ashworth Hall, where once there had been only loneliness and longing, there was now something else entirely. There was love. Not the desperate, one-sided love of a young bride trying to win a cold husband's heart, but a steady, quiet, enduring love, the kind that grew slowly, like roots sinking deep into the earth, the kind that could weather any storm, the kind that would last a lifetime. Elara closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of roses and night air and the quiet, reassuring presence of the man beside her. She had spent so long waiting for love to find her. But love had been there all along, buried beneath layers of silence and pride and fear, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to bloom. And now at last it had. She smiled into the darkness. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she was finally home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you for watching and see you in the next amazing story.